Hello and welcome to the CEC Report for the 1st of July 2016. I'm Richard Bardon and joining me today is CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
On today's show, Brexit, the death knell for politics as usual, and time to break the corporate stranglehold on Australia. So first, Brexit, the death knell for politics as usual. Now everyone would have seen about a week ago, or just over a week ago by the time this goes to air, the British population turned out 72%, about 35 million of them, to vote to leave the EU, and the referendum passed 52% to 48%, that vote. And the establishment, political establishment over there, and the markets immediately freaked out because the markets had been going by the bookmakers' odds, ironically, or fittingly, and ignoring what turned out to be very accurate opinion polls.
There's a precedent for that, Richard, just to start. Back in the last election in Queensland, when the LNP got wiped out, the same thing happened. The bookmakers were saying, no, the LNP will be returned. Instead, they got reduced down to less than, half a dozen members of parliament or something. I mean, so you can't rely on the bookmakers because they're not actually looking at the people, the population of the electors. They're looking at a certain strata they can afford to bet.
Yeah. And the stock markets around the world, including in Australia, have dropped hundreds of millions of dollars, and including Domino's Pizza I saw this morning, which what that has to do with Brexit, I have no idea, but that's the whole general perception of how things work has been shaken, and rightly so. And we headlined our Australian Alert Service this week, Brexit Earthquake, which you can see here, because that's what this really is. You know, it's like a real earthquake. This is not some one-off event. This is the consequence of tensions that have been building up for decades below the surface. And this is more than just a rejection of the EU bureaucracy in Brussels. It's a, as we call it, a democratic counterattack on the global financial elites who have oppressed the populations of Europe and much of the rest of the world with their austerity and bailouts, bail-ins to prop up their banks. You know, the examples of Greece, for instance.
Yeah, well, what's taking place with the Brexit is, as we've made it very clear, is an economic response by the people. Usually the working class, we'll say a bit more about in a minute. But look what's taking place in Greece. Look, the way that Greece has been smashed as part of the European Union. Look at other countries like Spain, Italy and so forth. Look, this is total turmoil here because the policies of globalisation aren't working. And interestingly enough, in the paper today, the Telegraph in New South Wales, they did a full-page spread of all the parties in the Senate, and that's what they said, that we believe globalisation is going to fail. At least the media got something right.
Going to destroy us all, I think was the words they used.
I mean, thank goodness they got that right. I mean, it's a hilarious spread. But that's true. We do say that. We actually say that very loudly. Globalisation is a policy that created the EU in the first place. It was done by the British Crown through the City of London and other institutions in order to create effectively a fascist economic dictatorship. And that's what you've got. You've got an unelected technocracy in the EU that is running the affairs of countries, and sovereignty has just been completely flushed out down the drain. And this is what the British in particular, in this referendum, the ordinary people are saying, well, we're losing our industries, we're no longer manufacturing what we could, we can't produce anything because we've got these strict rules by the EU, we don't want a bar of it. And then, of course, the City of London didn't understand that their policies are destroying the lives of millions of British people. And the British people have risen up and said, we don't want it.
Yeah, and the areas of Britain with the biggest leave vote were the old former industrial or the struggling few remaining industrial areas, particularly in the north of England and the steel producers in Wales and so forth.
We show that on a very clear graph on the front of the alert service, so that's quite amazing.
Yeah, and then of course another expression of the City of London's discontent here is that immediately the Leave vote succeeded, which both the official position of the British Labour Party was to remain in the Union, and Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, even though he's been a lifelong Eurosceptic, he accepted the party position. And campaigned to stay in for a variety of reasons. But immediately they lost that vote. There's a coup attempt being run against Corbyn by the Blairite faction that works directly for the City of London.
Yeah, well, there's two things here. This coup was not a result of Brexit. This has been cooking up for quite some time because you have the Blairite faction inside the UK Labor Party that want to get rid of what Corbyn represents. I mean, what does he want to do? He wants to go with people's quantitative easing, get rid of the Bank of England. In other words, produce credit in order to really develop and get the economics of manufacturing and the industrial capacity of Britain built up again. That's what he wants to do. That's completely against the City of London. The other thing too, what people may not realise, is that there's a very important report coming out called the Chilcot Report very shortly, and this is the detailed report going way back to Tony Blair's involvement in getting Britain and the US into an illegal war.
And Iraq, the 2003 invasion.
The 2003 invasion of Iraq. Now, what Jeremy Corbyn has said, that if that report comes out and shows that Tony Blair is actually a war criminal, then he should be
tried as
a war criminal.
Exactly.
So you have all the Blairites and Tony Blair himself saying, well, if we have Corbyn in there, we're in big trouble. I mean, I'm going to get tried as a war criminal, and the whole directionality of the Blair regime is going to be brought into question. And they're terrified about that. So they've got to get rid of Corbyn no matter what. Now, there's a leadership challenge coming up. And so the reason that Corbyn hasn't resigned, Richard, is because he was elected by over 60% of the Labor Party
membership. Which a few years ago they changed the rules so that the parliamentary Labor Party, the parliamentary members don't have the say. The membership of the party do, so it's a democratic process.
And he still has tremendous support amongst the normal membership of the party. So this is a very interesting battle. He's got to now face another leadership challenge, obviously, because of what the party's trying to do to get rid of him. But we'll have to, as they say, watch this channel and we'll keep reporting on it.
Yeah, and the other aspect of this Brexit, which, as we said, the establishment really did just not see coming somehow, because David Cameron called this election on this referendum, on the assumption that it would fail. So he's resigned, of course, and called on Corbyn to do the same, which will probably only increase Corbyn's popularity. But across the Atlantic, the United States establishment is watching all of this happen. All these, more calls for Euro exits by countries like France, where the Prime Minister Manuel Valls has said that France is going to reject this free trade deal, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, because he doesn't want to spark off a Brexit-style insurrection. Marine Le Pen, the head of the Front National Nationalist Party, is already calling for a referendum, and they're worried about not just losing the EU as a trading bloc, but if that goes, they're worried NATO will go. The whole post World War II order will break down. There was an article which we've cited in our alert service here in the New York Times, an editorial alerting people to this danger. Now, as far as we're concerned, that can't happen too soon, because the World War II order has brought us very close to World War III, as we talk about often on this program.
That's right. And look, in the background you have what's taking place with the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. They're absolutely roaring ahead with infrastructure development projects, bilateral, trilateral collaboration and so forth. So there's a different order in the world underpinning or behind all of this. And I think this is something very significant in terms of providing a counter-position for the turmoil of the transatlantic system. Yeah. So we're going to have to watch that very closely and continue to monitor it.
Yep. And this, as we said, this mood is spreading. It's right across the world, not just the EU, and including in Australia, where people are just as dissatisfied as the British and Europeans. So we're going to take a break and discuss that afterwards. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing it's time to break the corporate stranglehold on Australia. Now, before the break, Craig, we were talking about how this general mood of discontent with the political status quo, what we often refer to as a mass strike phenomenon, is sweeping the whole world, not just this Brexit vote, the British vote to exit the European Union is just the latest and loudest expression of that. And Australians are equally dissatisfied, according to a recent poll by the University of Canberra Institute for Governance and Public Analysis. I'll just read out these figures here. They said that that Australians' trust in government and politicians are now at their lowest levels since 1993. They did a joint survey with the Museum of Australian Democracy, and they said only 37% of Australians subscribe to a political party, the lowest level since 1967, which gels with what we've seen in the last couple of election cycles. You know, the major party vote has just been going down and down, the informal vote's been going up. And, you know, they quoted one person surveyed, says, "As I get older and witness more broken promises, it's become harder to know what each party stands for and how much of it's really about effective policies and how much is about political goals and stepping on others to get to the top." And that was from a 22-year-old woman from Canberra. So as I get older, that's that's quite recent history. And Australia's business elite, you know, with their revolving door through the parliament, where, you know, parliamentarians get sponsorship for electoral campaigns from corporations and then go to work for them when they retire from politics. Well, the Australian Financial Review ran an article yesterday. CEOs are worried about a hung parliament. They said dozens of business figures, including from Wesfarmers, Woodside Petroleum, BHP Billiton, all these giant multinational corporations, they're terrified. They didn't use that word, but they're terrified of a hung parliament that won't allow the accepted agenda to go through. You know, the post-1983 political consensus. So yeah, the loss. They're claiming that it's because of the loss in national productivity in Canberra as a result of hung parliaments. They said dwarfs most budgetary line items, but then one of these gentlemen turns around and says, even if you don't agree with the policies, it's better for the country if you deliver on them. So you're supposed to pass policy that you're opposed to so that the status quo can continue. So
well, that's how desperate they are, Richard, because I mean the country's in many cases frozen, and what business needs, like entrepreneurial business, particularly in terms of infrastructure development, is a very clear and decisive processes. And they aren't there. And as you go from one parliament to the other, where people play politics, these politicians play politics with important decision-making, things like infrastructure, it really does frustrate business. Because, you know, the business is very crucial. Entrepreneurship is very much in the private sector, right?
Yeah.
Middle, small business and so forth. Rely on decisions to government in order to be able to facilitate the sort of productivity that's in the private sector. That just is not happening at the moment, anywhere near where it needs to be.
Yeah. All right, Craig. We'll go to a break now, and when we come back, we'll talk about an event you were at yesterday where you were able to discuss some of these subjects. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing it's time to break the corporate stranglehold on Australia. Now, before the break, Craig, we were talking about you've just attended an important event in Shepparton, the Inland Rail Roundtable. So why don't you tell the viewers about that?
Well, Richard, I think what's taking place in the country now is that there's a real urgency to actually develop our infrastructure, because the fact is that it's just not happening. Now, I want to go back for viewers and go back to 2002 when we published our first Infrastructure New Citizen. And at that particular point, we featured the work in our railway development programs of Professor Lance Endersby. And he proposed the Australian Ring Road proposal, right? Ring Rail proposal. And what's crucial about this is an infrastructure development corridor in order to be able to increase the productivity of the nation. And it goes through Shepparton. Now, Shepparton is a very, very important strategic town in the middle of the Murray-Darling Basin. And it desperately needs high-quality infrastructure to be able to ship out its the production, the agricultural production from that area. They have something like 1.7 million tonnes of production right? But no real effective way of getting it out there apart from trucks. In fact, on the Goulburn Valley Highway, there's one truck every minute travelling down into Melbourne. So the proposal, the discussion yesterday was the Inland Rail Roundtable, and it was put together by the Greater Shepparton Shire Council. But it was a fantastic discussion because there's actually 3 projects on the table now, Richard, for actual inland rail. Well, the first is the government's proposal, that's the Australian Rail Track Corporation Limited for the inland rail proposal. Now, this is basically linking up existing rail infrastructure and between Melbourne and Brisbane, right? And they say it's going to cost about $10 billion, but that's only basically laying the track. There's a second proposal which was being put down by the National Trunk Rail Corporation. This is a private corporation that wants to completely rebuild the rail system between Melbourne and Brisbane. And there's a third proposal for high-speed rail. Now, all of this was discussed at this forum yesterday and various proposals were put forward. And what's really exciting for us is that if you have a look at Lance Endersby's proposal for an Asian Express rail project, which we first featured in 2002, a number of these proposals both mirror what he is talking about. We were there, I got an opportunity to speak as a Senate candidate for Victoria. So did Jeff Davey, our local candidate for the seat of Murray. Jeff's been campaigning up there as part of the election. But what I wanted to feature for people is the, in a sense, urgency for this infrastructure. Now, the National Trunk Rail Company, it's a private company. It's a consortium of people that really want to build this infrastructure because they can see the enormous benefit of actually having the infrastructure in place to shift and increase the productivity of this particular region. Now, I want to play for you a video. It's their promotional video for their rail proposal. Now, we don't agree with the fact that this has to be funded as what they call a PPP, a public-private partnership. We should be developing, and it's our policy, we should be developing corporations like, for example, the Snowy Mountain Commission, which built the Snowy Mountain Scheme, referred to by the American Institute of Engineers as the 7th wonder of the world at the particular time. Or another government-operated institution called the Tasman Hydroelectric Commission that built all of Tasmania's hydroelectricity capacity. We should be doing this through centralised credit, through a national bank issuing large amounts of credit, but run and governed on behalf of the people, owned as public ownership. Now, these corporations,
like the original Commonwealth Bank used to be.
So these corporations showed, Richard, how this can be done. Now, in the last 40 years, we've seen a move because of the takeover by Mont Pelerin think tanks out of the Institute for Economic Affairs in London towards privatisation. Governments have to be smaller, economic rationalism and so forth.
Balanced budgets, all of that.
But there's a real desperation these days in actually to build infrastructure. So I want to play you this video. Bear in mind, we don't support the PPP idea, but I think that the optimism and the potentiality of building these projects is so crucially important. We just have to keep that in mind.
The time for National Trunk Rail's inland rail solution is now. Productivity will drive the prosperity of Australia in the 21st century. Every day, 1,800 trucks move freight up and down the Newell Highway that links Melbourne and Brisbane. That's bad enough, but it's forecast to almost double to more than 3,500 trucks by 2030. NTR can solve this problem in 6 years. That's why governments of all persuasions are supporting the principle of an inland rail line designed to take trucks off the road, improve safety and dramatically increase productivity by reducing the cost of transport to get our resources to market. This modal transformation from road to rail can only be driven by productivity. The ARTC, the Australian Rail Track Corporation, wants a 10-year program to deliver the project, proposing a standard gauge rail line from Port of Melbourne to southern Brisbane, bypassing Sydney, that will cost more than $10 billion. But that proposal is incomplete for modal transformation from road to rail, and the federal government has committed only 3% of that, $300 million. Now, a private sector team of seasoned industry professionals has come up with a better alternative. National Trunk Rail proposes not only standard gauge rail, port to port, but double-stacked rolling stock from day one, and with a route that's shorter, straighter, flatter and faster. That means it's quicker and cheaper to build, in less than only 6 years, and significantly cheaper to use. A big uplift in productivity to enable our agricultural and mineral export industries to take advantage of Australia's free trade agreements. The proposed ARTC route travels from Melbourne to outer Brisbane. By contrast, NTR takes a more direct route to Parkes, servicing the Shepparton and Narandera Food Bowl, then all the way to Port of Brisbane. It also includes a spur to miles in the Surat Basin, with twin tunnels through the range to transport both mineral and agricultural resources. The route variations are significant. NTR is shorter by 136 kilometres and independent of all existing track, flatter by more than 1,000 vertical metres, and saves 4 hours on ARTC's expected 23-hour journey from Melbourne, efficiency that's vital if we're going to get trucks off the road. National Trunk Rail is a nation-building project which will stand for 100 years and beyond. A project that contributes more than $50 billion to the national economy in its first 10 years of operation, delivering 25,000 construction jobs and 3,000 more during operation. It will deliver the best economic and engineering solution. A competitive public-private partnership process is the best way to determine that solution and the team to deliver it. Under a PPP, the NTR team will deliver inland rail within 6 years of approvals, making it attractive for private sector investment. The productivity enhancement and supply chain transformation from NTR's inland rail solution is good for industry and the economy, good for regional communities, and good for long-term road safety. It's a massive uplift in the productivity of our nation's transport infrastructure to complement Australia's free trade agreements.
Yeah, so Richard, as you see, this is a very exciting proposal. It also mirrors, and I'll come back to what we talked about in our Infrastructure New Citizen, it mirrors Land Centre's original proposal for the Australian Ring Road, right? As you can see from their routes, it won't take much more to link that up through to the Northern Territory, high-speed freight all the way through. This is where we've got to go. This is what can be done, and we need governments that can make decisions that are, and I believe, with minority groups or political parties, people want this sort of infrastructure development. This is coherent with what's taking place with the Land Bridge and the World Land Bridge proposals, the One Belt, One Road proposals internationally. This is coherent with what is actually taking place in the BRICS nations. So that's why we were participating in this forum. There's very exciting ideas on the table. We have to support them as best as we can and put up alternatives, ideas for the funding and so forth.
All right, well, looks like we're about out of time. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you all for watching. Do call in for a free copy of the Australian Alert Service if you haven't already, and join us next week for more of the CEC Report.
You've been watching the CEC Report, the weekly TV show of the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia. What can people do to find out more, Robert?
Well, they can get on our website, www.cecaust.com.au, or they can call our toll-free number for Lisa to order a copy of this, the Australian Alert Service, which is our weekly publication where we write up all the material we use. That number is 1-800-636-432.